Good evening and welcome. Real estate is one of the largest contributors of tax revenue in Fiji. Recently, the Real Estate Licensing Board, or RealB, as well as the Real Estate Agents Association, has been grappling with a number of bogus real estate agents operating illegally around the nation. Tonight, we discuss this, as well as a host of issues concerning the real estate sector in Fiji. Our guests are Mr. Anand Gounder, President of the Real Estate Agents Association, and Ms. Veronica Toms, Executive Committee Member of the Association. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So for someone who may not be aware, let's start off the show with explaining what the association is, the Real Estate Agents Association, what its objectives are and how it functions. Mr. Gounder.
We are basically a lobby group. We represent the agents, and we represent them in all matters such as their grievances and the challenges they are facing. Our objective is to make our agents work with utmost ethical methods which are prescribed in the Code of Ethics. We also work with the other stakeholders like workers, Commerce Commission, and Real Estate Agents Licensing Board, and the engineers, valuation companies, and then we see their side of rules and regulations, and we try and work with each other's, we try and obey each other's rules and regulations and try and make it a modest and a robust industry, you know.
So who is the association comprised of? Who is in the association?
There are different companies in Fiji. Like we have about 85 companies in Fiji, and these companies, they become a member of the association. And the companies also have salespeople, and salespeople can also become associate members of our association.
And currently, how big is the association?
We have around 60 companies in our association.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you also work closely with a lot of the stakeholders. So one of these stakeholders, I'm guessing, is the Real Estate Licensing Board.
That's correct.
If you could, for someone who may not be aware, watching at home, what's the relationship between the association and RealB?
Our association is a lobby group, as I said, but RealB is a regulatory body. They are there to issue licenses, they are there to issue licenses to branch managers, and also bring about disciplinary measures when something goes wrong. How we work hand in hand with Real Estate Agents Licensing Board is that when we have grievances, we take it to them. Mm-hmm. We sit down and discuss those things, you know. We try and find solutions to the challenges we are facing, you know. And then they may have some issues which our agents have to follow. We will take it to our members. This is what the rule says, this is what the regulation says, and we have got to abide by the laws and rules.
Okay. Ms. Toms, as an executive committee member, how does the board or how does the committee itself work towards representing agents and all of these various companies?
Well, it's basically in our meetings we discuss things. We tend to form consensus on issues. At AGMs, we like to discuss these issues as well, so that we're trying to represent the industry as best we can. People like Anand spend a lot of time out, and a lot of the other boarders spend a lot of time in touch with a lot of the companies and getting feedback from them. Anand's been very proactive in getting a lot of the, not just the board members, but company owners together, the licensed agents, and particularly those in Suva, and just getting to know each other and work together, and gives us an informal venue in which we can just discuss things that are going on in the industry.
So it's safe to say that the association does represent, I guess, the wider view of the sector in general?
Exactly. That's correct.
Okay. So let's get into the issue at hand, which is the issue of bogus real estate agents. And of course, since the association is a good representative of the general issues concerning the sector, we will discuss some of those issues later on in the show. That's the intention. But first, let's discuss the issue of bogus real estate agents. How serious do you think the issue is in Fiji?
I would say from 1 to 10, the issue is at 10. And it is very serious. We have taxi drivers operating as agents. We have clerks operating as agents. We got all sorts of professional people operating as agents. And they got to be a stop to this, because the big problem is the government is missing out on a lot of revenue A lot of tax dollars is leaked out. And, these bogus agents, they take their money, they don't pay taxes, Whereas the agents, they have to pay so many different types of fees, and we pay our taxes, We have regulations on us that if we do not get a tax compliance, our license will not be renewed, So we have got so many rules and regulations on us, whereas the bogus agents, and I said they are, and I would guess that they are in somewhere around in a number of 5,000 to 7,000 bogus agents operating in Fiji. You only have to go to social media, and there are so many different types of social media to see how many people are posting properties. One of the things they say in their posts is on behalf of somebody.
Right.
It just cannot be on behalf of anybody. You got to be an agent or a licensed salesperson, then you can only sell. But they are doing these things, and I think Real Estate Agent Licensing Board is looking very hard at this. We have had a number of talks on this issue with Real Estate Agents Licensing Board, and I have raised this issue once with the minister as well. They are working on it, and I think there will be some tough regulations coming in.
So we had we did run a show with the acting head of the Real Estate Licensing Board, and of course he also had his views. This show happened last year. Since then, the issue continues to be reported in the media, which indicates that it is an ongoing issue. So in terms of the seriousness, could you refer us to some instances or situations where the clients or the buyers or sellers have lost out because of these bogus agents?
There are various cases, like not to mention anybody for confidential purposes, but there are many where vendors were told that they will get a certain deal by these bogus agents. They've gone out and they've teamed up with some, some conveyors, and they have made money out of it, and the vendors have lost, including the buyers. They were told a certain price, but when they signed the sales and purchase agreement, they made it to be a compulsive selling. They tried to compel them into buying the property, stating various examples as the property will be bought by somebody else if you do not act now. They are offering more money. There's so many different types of tactics used by these bogus agents to earn their own income, which they don't report.
Ms. Toms, even outside of the association, you both work in your own various fields. In the field, would you suggest that this is a serious ongoing issue?
Oh, it definitely is. It definitely is. And what is also concerning is not just that the agents are acting for their financial gain, but that the consumer, both the vendor and the purchaser, have got no legal protection. Like basically, you lose a lot of your legal rights when you're not operating within the legal sphere. Basically, you step outside that, and who do you lodge a complaint to? RealB can take legal action, I'm sure, but they can't censor that person in the sense that they're not an agent. So they're probably limited in what they can do, apart from banning them and making sure that person never becomes a registered sales agent.
We'll have more for you right after the break. So for someone who isn't aware, we've discussed this on the show before when we had RealB over, but just to refresh the information on it, what difference is there between a licensed real estate agent and someone who is bogus? Is it just the fact that they don't carry a license?
Not only that, but they are not trained. They do not know the real estate laws. They do not know the taxation laws. They basically know nothing. And their main objective is to make some money. That's it. Whereas the agents are trained. They're given training on various aspects of real estate, on real estate laws, on real estate taxation, on ethics, on conduct, how to become competent in the industry, They're trained, fully trained by each company. And Real Estate Agents Licensing Board also holds seminars, 2 or 3 seminars in a year. It's a whole day seminar where all the agents are called and salespeople are exposed to extensive training. So these bogus agents who are operating there, by themselves, they are not trained. They're not liable. They're not paying taxes, and the government is losing a huge amount of money.
And in the last segment, Ms. Toms raised a very important issue that once someone has dealt with a bogus real estate agent, who do you complain to? So what are the avenues that someone can pursue once they find out, perhaps after the transaction has been completed, that they've been duped or they've been conned into something that they didn't want to do in the first place? So who do you go to in such a situation?
I encourage the buyers and sellers both to go to the police. Police is the best place to go to. They can go to Real B and complain about it to Real B. Real B will refer them to police. So the best avenue is to go to the police because they can lay charges and present them in court.
And in what ways do these bogus agents operate? Does it come under the radar of the Real B or the association? Do they just operate on social media?
They operate, go ahead.
I think social media has given them a great platform to operate from because it's quite hard to monitor like all of social media. In my case, I use it extensively for my marketing. I am very social media based and using all the different platforms that I can. But for one person to be monitoring every single platform, every single page in Fiji, and every single group, and looking for, is that a real agent, is that a bogus agent, or is that actually a family member? And I run a Facebook page and I actually message people a lot of the time saying, well, I don't let sales through because that's a whole different can of worms, but just on rentals, just saying, is this your family property? I just try and establish that. And if it's not, it's like, I'm sorry, you either have to use an agent or the family, the owner themselves have to advertise it. And that's just a small fraction of what's going on out there.
So it is, because on social media, especially in Fiji, we have a number of groups and forums operating as primarily buy and sell places where, it's virtually impossible to control what sort of transactions take place there. So if we can get back to the issue that both of you referred to, which is sometimes when a member of the family may be selling on behalf of someone. At that point, are they inadvertently acting as a bogus agent, although they might not realize it?
They are actually. There's a provision for them. They should know this through this medium, that they can apply for a special license. They can always apply for a special license, and they get a one-time license, or they can apply again, and they get a two-time license, and they can sell legally. They don't have to be bogus agents. And one more thing, I will invite all these bogus agents operating. You go to your districts. There are so many companies operating there legally. Go and approach them, join them, become legal, pay taxes. Be legitimate.
Have you come across any cases where someone has brought the issue before you, and by that time it was simply too late to do anything about it, the transaction?
Many issues. We come across many issues, especially on the rental side. There are many issues. For example, let's give you for example, a real estate company has posted its signboard on a property.
Right.
A bogus agent goes and tells that the owner of the property, the landlord, that he is working for this company. And then he introduces a client and collects cash and goes from there. So it's very important for us to monitor those things. And we have come across a lot of examples as such, that a lot of people are going to approach the vendors and the landlords directly who are bogus. They don't have a license. But the vendors should be informed that they should check their ID cards.
Right.
It is very important that the ID cards are checked. And then the vendors are also encouraged not to only interview one agent or one salesperson. They can interview several agents or several salespersons to see who fits the best to sell his or her property.
And in such, in such a situation, how important is consumer awareness?
It is very important, extremely important. I think more awareness should be given to the consumers. We should have more seminars and more radio talk shows like this, or road shows. Real B is doing something right now. They are going on road shows, informing the consumers of their rights and what they should expect out of an agent. So that's something beginning to work now, and the awareness is coming about right now.
And Ms. Toms, how would you say that the association is playing a part in all of this?
I think by being vocal, I think, turning up here tonight to talk on the issue, and discussing it amongst our members, bringing it to Real B's attention. I know I have been in a work situation where we've seen things and it has been forwarded to Real B, because it's like, okay, it's not fair on us who are paying to register, who do our years in the industry before we can become registered, to have people doing that. So, all agents really should be proactive and be reporting people that they see, I think.
So with the companies that come under the association, does a lot of information sharing happen?
Exactly. Yeah. We share information. I get 4 or 5 calls every day from our members on complaints, on grievances, on such cases as what we're discussing right now. So we sit down and talk and discuss and how to approach this, and how to resolve this, But the regulations are not that hard right now, They are working on it. I think it should be done within a year or so, and then these bogus agents, they will find tough time operating.
When we come back from our next break, we'll discuss regulation within the real estate sector. Stay with us. Mr. Gandur and Ms. Toms, you both must be aware of the amount of public faith that people have in real estate agents. And I think you'll agree with me when you say that the public view of real estate agents hasn't always been positive. So how do real estate agents regulate themselves? How is there a mechanism or framework to ensure that they operate ethically and within the law?
There is a code of ethics set by both the association and Real B. And it's very clear that agents got to work ethically. In that code of ethics, we got to be accountable. We got to be absolutely honest. We got to be loyal to our clients. We have to be transparent, and we have to be competent. We need to know our job, and those are the things we work with, to be of best service to our clients.
Ms. Toms, what about the ethical standards? What would you say about the ethical standards that are in the sector at the moment?
Well, to start with, every real estate agent has to have a clean police record to become a real estate agent. Every salesperson has to have a clean record. So that's all done and has to be filed with Real B. They check that we're fully tax compliant. We have to file all of those things. They require us, before we get our agent's license, that we have worked in the industry for a minimum period of time, and that is a recent history, not, you can't go and say, I worked in the real estate agents industry 10 years ago. It has to be within the last 5 to 7 years. So they're doing that, and then if people do report, I can tell you they're very fast to pull you in, the Real B, and to sit down and discuss the issues with you. So they are on the ball in that regard. I can tell you that much. So yeah, it's all about making sure it's as robust as possible in the background there. Yeah.
So in terms of commission, in fact, this is what I was getting to when I started off with this discussion.
Okay.
A lot of people see real estate agents, and in fact, a lot of these companies, as people who try and make extra money off of your sale. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that assessment?
No, I don't agree with that at all. As a matter of fact, we have passed it in our executive board meetings that a commission should be a percentage only. Some agents charge 2%, some 3%, and some 5%. So that's the standard charges. But we cannot charge, for example, a property is selling at $200,000, and an agent is able to find a buyer for $300,000. There's a willing buyer and willing seller. We cannot make that $100,000 as our commission. No, absolutely no. We can charge a percentage, which is like 4% of $300,000, which will be $12,000. That's the standard we are working at right now, and we're trying to impose that with our members.
So at the moment, there is no set percentage as to what a real estate agent can charge?
There is no regulation on this, even though the Act says that we cannot charge excessive commission. Excessive commission is not defined by number, but my understanding would be, since we've been charging 5% or 4%, that's the standard charge.
Right. Have there been situations where a licensed real estate holder has charged a substantially absurd amount?
In a few cases, I would say, like, let's be honest about things, in a few cases, but majority of our agents, believe me, majority of our agents, licensed agents, are working very ethically.
So, and this, again, we come back to consumer awareness. So how aware should the vendor be, or how many options should the vendor look at in order to get the best deal? How is a vendor supposed to be aware that they are getting the best deal out of their real estate agent?
I think shop around. You know, talk to different companies, see what each company offers you for your percentage, what marketing are you getting, how big a team is working for you. And they are working for you because you're paying them. So you know, they really should be out there doing the best for you that they can. So make them work for it up front by looking at the different companies that operate in your area. I always think as much information as possible. It's not a done thing here that you get your own valuation when you're a buyer. You rely on the vendor's valuations. But if you were out there seriously buying to protect yourself, you should be getting all that information for yourself. Your best agent, your own valuation, your own engineer's report, because that's all done for you. If something comes back later, and I've seen this in one situation where a vendor sold the place, the buyer used the vendor's engineer's report, and it cost them substantially. They saved, what did they save, $1,500 for a valuation, and it cost them well over $500,000 to remedy the issues with the property. And you know, that's about getting the best information you can. And I say this to everybody. My job when I'm out there is I will tell you what I think is best for you. If you don't do that, I'll work with you, but I put it up there a lot of times, you know, that it's really in your best interest to do all these things.
And when we did speak with RealB and when we speak with industry professionals, there is this advice that it's always better if you're buying or selling to work through a real estate agent to ensure that your rights are protected. Given the general overview that people have in Fiji of real estate agents, you must agree that a lot of people prefer to deal directly with buyers and sellers. So in what way, if someone who isn't aware, someone's looking to buy or sell and they're watching right now, in what way is it better to deal or safer to deal with a real estate agent?
In most cases, if you look at a vendor and vendor and a buyer dealing directly, there is no stoppage, there is no stopping that. They can do that. That's fine. As far as they're informed, both parties are informed thoroughly on the transaction. You know, like how many days it will take to close, or what are the steps they're going to take to close the sale. You know, how long does the loan process take? Is there a valid engineer certificate there, or was there a valid valuation done? You know, and these are all the issues we have to deal with. How much taxes they'll have to pay. Most of the time, most vendors do not know if they're selling their property, whether they have gone up to the residency period of 5 years, and when they sell, they're not, on their first property, they're not charged any capital gains tax. So there are a lot of issues that they have to understand first. They have to comprehend before they go into a deal. Whereas with an agent, they mostly know all those things, and they explain these things to the vendor and the buyer, purchasers. And after explanation, then they come and they say, okay, we are willing to do a deal and go into a contract. Then they do go into a contract.
And Ms. Toms, what would you say is the level of, I guess, the duty of care that a real estate agent owes to their client?
In our case, our client is always the person that's selling, usually, or the landlord, in the case of renting, unless we're acting as a buyer's agent, which doesn't happen that often, but it is quite a valid setup. So basically, the contractual obligation comes down to the person who's paying you. and you have an absolute duty of care to that person. If anything, if you're working for the vendor and the buyer says something to you, if it's relevant to that sell and purchase, you are obliged to go and tell the vendor that.
Right.
You're not obliged necessarily the other way back so much. There are frameworks in place for that. But you're not allowed to withhold information that might be pertinent from a buyer. But your obligation is to the person who's paying the bill. You must always work in their best interest.
Do you have any thoughts on the general duty of care?
Well, there's a general terminology used as a fiduciary duty.
Fiduciary duty,
It's like a trustee. You're like a trustee. All that trust is placed upon you. So you got to work ethically in a transparent manner.
We'll have more for you right after this. So let's move on to discussing some other issues in our last two segments that concern the real estate sector in general. One of those is, of course, in the current economy of Fiji. How's the real estate sector affected?
It has been affected greatly, and the liquidity was a problem. Like banks were not lending that much money. We must be aware that for 9, 10, 15, 10, 12 years, banks were lending money. Banks were lending money, giving out money, and giving out money. And a lot of money has been given out. So, like if they don't collect money, now they are giving higher interest rates on term deposits, and they're collecting money. And the problem is slowly stabilizing, I can see. It's coming. But this is not a Fiji problem itself. It's a global crisis, America and China having trade war, raising tariffs on each other, It affects the whole world. It affects us as well. And I think the economy at general was, was suffering, not only real estate industry, but we did see a drop in sales.
So when the economy does have liquidity issues, Ms. Toms, how do you think that affects the real estate sector? Does it affect the vendors most?
I think it hits everybody eventually, but vendors are probably the first ones. Probably the buyers actually, because at the moment what we're seeing is an increase in the amount of deposit required. So suddenly you've got buyers who have to have, it's gone from like 10% to 20%. And what you have to realise is that's not just a Fiji issue. That's a issue within the Pacific. Our banks here are owned overseas, and when they have changes in banking regulations overseas, because they are still operated out of their home country, they have to comply with the legislation in their home country too. So sometimes it might not be that Fiji decided that we had to raise deposits from 10 to 20%, but someone in Australia and New Zealand has regulated that, and that flows through to the Fiji industry. And so it's impacting firstly our buyers, then it starts impacting on the vendors because it makes it harder for them to sell their house. You suddenly have, if people can get to 20%, they might have had their 10, they've now got maybe another year to wait. So it can put a bit of a hole in the industry because people will sit there and save more till they comply, and so the market can be hit very hard very quickly.
And Mr. Gounder, in your experience, how long do you predict this issue will continue?
Well, Fiji is a small economy. Fiji has always bounced back. We know from experience that Fiji has always bounced back. So. The government is taking steps to improve the thing. We are looking at banks now lending money. They were pretty tight at some stage in time. Now they are opening doors and they are lending money, especially on smaller properties. And I think if and people are encouraged to put term deposits, so that banks have cash deposits in with them, so they can lend, and now I've seen that there's an improvement coming in the industry. I would say it won't take much longer. Maybe before the end of the year, we should come back. We should come back.
So in the media, one of the questions that we often get asked, whether it's a formal setting or informal setting, the price of real estate in Fiji itself has skyrocketed, and more people are concerned about the fact that it's getting more and more difficult to own real estate in Fiji. Have you received, do you share those sentiments?
Yes, we do share those sentiments. There are many reasons behind that. Number one is that lack of inventory. We do not have enough houses to sell in the market. We have more buyers than sellers. So of course there will be competition. Buyers will come and offer more for a property. If there are 4 or 5 buyers to a property, they'll offer more, and the best offer will be accepted by the seller. That's one. And things have gone up in prices. If you look at 10 years back, and if you buy building materials 10 years ago, it would have been much cheaper than what it is now. You look at skilled laborers, that the cost of skilled laborers has gone up. Ordinary laborers, they are asking for higher pay now, up to $8 to $10 an hour. So you see, and then finding these skilled workers is very hard.
Right.
It's extremely hard to find these skilled workers. I've seen many places houses been built halfway and the contractors have left because they don't have workers with them. So all these factors have affected the price of the properties going up. That's what we have noticed in the industry itself.
I agree, and when these issues are raised, you know, they go hand in hand. A colleague of mine is always complaining that he just can't find people to work on the house that he's constructing. So how much, what proportion of the problem would you say is contributed by foreign investment in real estate?
I think government has a control over that right now, but it was some time back that Chinese or other buyers were coming in, not one particular race, but other buyers, foreign investors were coming here, and they were offering high amount of money for a property, and they're buying these freehold properties. Since the government has put up a law that residential freehold lots and properties or residential Crown C properties cannot be sold to foreign investors in town and city boundaries, that has taken care of a lot of problems in that area. But they have contributed quite a bit initially, but now it's no longer that problem.
And Ms. Toms, in your field of work, have you come across situations where vendors or buyers, they ask for a blind price, they're just simply not aware of what the market price is, so they ask or offer up or down, and there's a huge disparity between what the market price is and what they want?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I actually had one situation where we had an offer on a property, and I had some people in town, so I was driving them around, showing them around different properties. And because the vendor saw me in a vehicle with potential buyers for Suva properties, they assumed that I was ripping them off, and that the offer we had on the table was just to get the property off them as cheap as possible, and so they literally pulled out of the deal because they thought that they should then get way more than the offer price that was before them. It was a genuine offer, and unfortunately they walked away from what was potentially a good deal.
And what causes this?
This is greed, simply greed. I'm telling you the truth, greed on all sides,
Yes.
not only one particular side. But I'll give you another example. Just 2 to 3 days ago, one of my salespersons brought up a deal to the company and say, we have a vendor trying to sell his 3 lots, which are commercial lots, and he's doing engineering on that, and he's looking for about like $500,000 each 1 acre lot. And he told me, do you have any buyers for that? I said, I'll talk to some business people, So I talked to one of them, and he offered $1.5 million for all of them, 3 of them. And when we took that back to the vendor, he raised the price to $1 million each.
Right.
So you see, these things are happening in the industry. But I would advise the vendors or the property owners, the best thing to do is to go and get an indication price. Go and hire a valuation company. There are so many valuation companies in Fiji, They can go and talk to a valuation company. It's only about a $500 cost, for a $500,000 or $700,000 property.
Right.
So they can pay that $500, and they can get an indication price, which is valuation, and they will have a measure of how much I should really get for my property, and then the market will speak for itself.
So, for example, if the valuation is at 500,000, and your real estate agents comes back to you with something that's substantially lower than that, I mean, that's valid grounds for you not to accept the offer, right?
That's correct. It's upon the vendor to decide on that, because what we do is, if we get, and when we get sometimes 2 or 3 offers on a property. So if you get 3 offers, we present them all at one time to the vendor. So we discuss that with him or her, and we say that these are the offers we have received. What do you want to do? Do you want to accept one of these? Do you want a day to, think about this, refer it to your lawyer or your friend or anybody else, and decide for yourself that if you want to accept this, But in most cases, if it is very low, they don't take it. They will wait. We advise them to wait. We advise them, let the market improve, or, wait for a little while. You may get a little higher price later on,
We'll discuss more when we come back with our final segment right after this. So in our last segment, in our earlier segments, we've only discussed primarily buying and selling real estate. But another important aspect is landlord and tenancy. And I'm sure you'll agree when I say that there are a multitude of issues when it comes to landlord and tenancy. What are some of these issues that have come before the association?
High rents. Rents are quite high right now. But we like to advise the landlords and tenants that the rents are high because cost of living has gone high, building materials have gone high, as we have discussed in the selling part of it, right? The second thing is this, that since I would say 2007, 2008, there were a lot of permits being given for buildings to be built, especially on income properties. That when people are building homes now, they're having additional flats with the homes, and there are so many of them have come up now. But the landlords are asking for the same rents, which were like 12 months ago, or like 15 months ago. The rents are really, there's a competition here now. I know that I know several cases where rents were $1,600. Now the same rental apartment is going for $1,200 because there are so many other rental flats available, and people have a choice. They can go and rent any of those rental apartments. So now there is a competition, and the landlords got to be aware of this. If they refuse to reduce the rent, their property will stay longer in the market, and they will lose on their payments or on their income. So they have to be aware of that because of this, so many permits been given and so many buildings been built and so many apartments been built, the rents are subsiding, the rents are coming down right now.
But I think we can all agree that there needs to be better regulation in place, especially in this field. I know for a fact that the rent freeze has been going on for a long time. Landlords have been complaining that there is a rent freeze in place, and that's substantially affecting our potential income. Tenants, on the other hand, are saying, well, the prices that we pay are not really reflective of a rent freeze because we've seen that it has been going up. So what sort of issues does the association come across, especially in relation to rent freeze?
Speaking from my perspective, in terms of what I see happening particularly with new builds, so a landlord's got 4 flats to let, 6 flats, however many he's put on his property. He's got mortgage payments to meet, and he's got a new property. He doesn't know how far in the future he's going to be allowed to make a rent adjustment. And of course, the bigger the property, the more in FERCA's eye you're going to be. So if you stick out literally on the horizon by the size you are, you'll also be sticking out in FERCA's books too. So I'm sure those buildings are being very heavily monitored in terms of rents and such, and we're seeing FERCA take owners to task with about 50 prosecutions in the last 12 months, I believe. But if you're the owner of that building and you have to get it rented pretty quickly, but also looking forward, if you don't know when your next rent increase is going to be, you're going to set your rent now as high as possible because because you have no clue when you can change that. The current rent freeze has been in place for 11 years, and looking forward, if that's 11 years time down the track, you've had cost of living increases, possibly, mortgage rates are very fluid. They can go up, they can go down. I remember a point myself in New Zealand where they pretty much doubled overnight, and a lot of people were suddenly left with like, oh my God, how do I now make my mortgage payments? So there's lots of things you take into account in that situation. But working with the landlords, I can see why they're starting out high on new buildings. Those who are in older buildings, what we're seeing is the complaint I come across all the time: lack of maintenance. The owners do no repairs and maintenance. They really have no incentive to, because they'll be continually keeping the property up to a certain standard without their income doing the same. And basically, if you were continuing to maintain your property, your rental income should be tracking along the same way, within reason, you would expect. But they've got none of that at the moment.
Do you share those sentiments?
I do share that to a great extent, but on the other hand, we have seen during this freeze, rents have gone up as well. So, where do we find a compromise?
Right.
I think there should be a very big awareness plus consensus or discussions going on this issue, whereby all the stakeholders meet and discuss, the landlords and the tenants give their views, so that we can formulate something, which will bring about a fair rent practiced by the landlords and affordability by the tenants,
And so generally when we're speaking of landlord tenancy issues, because it's not only the tenants that are, victimized, let's put a word to it. Sometimes landlords can also be victims of, if they haven't followed the proper procedure, if there isn't enough paperwork. So tenants also tend to, for lack of a better word, bully their landlords, right? I mean, that's certainly possible.
Exactly. I just came across two situations today where a person has been living in a flat for 9 months, haven't paid any rents. The bailiff has gone and given him a notice. Nothing happened. The issue was taken to small claims court, and then there was a JGS served. It's a process. It takes about like 12 months. So it takes time, 15 months. So in this time, the landlords are losing money. They're not getting money, and the tenant is enjoying free accommodation. So when they go to court, there is a means test in the end. The courts give a tenant a means test. What are the means by which you will pay the arrears, or you will continue to pay your rent? And they can say, we can only afford to pay $10 a month. And that's where the landlords loses in a big time. So these are the issues we got to really look at it very, very closely,
And do you think that the situation could potentially be improved with more stringent regulation, better laws put in place?
I think so, because it's got to be both sides, It's got to be landlords and tenants both. We cannot have laws only affecting the landlords. We could have laws, and guidelines for tenants as well. So that if they, and one of the things I would suggest here is to have because these court procedures are very lengthy. They're very lengthy, sometimes takes 2 years to resolve one issue, And then these tenants are enjoying that quite, eviction is very, very expensive. You go to high court, it's $7,000, $8,000. So it's very expensive, and most of the landlords cannot afford that. So there should be a tri-party forum, where, both the parties meet with, industry experts, and a decision is made there and then, and they're going to abide by the decision.
I also think making some things more accessible, like FCCC have provided us with an outline of a lease agreement that is recommended, and because it's coming from them, it covers all the bases, it covers everybody's liabilities, and everything like that. But it's in a booklet that we've got. It's not available in a downloadable form on the internet or anything like that. Whereas if everybody could access something like that, you know, go and print it out and fill it in. Also, it's 27 pages long, so like photocopying it out of that book. I've seen photocopies done that way. It's not very tidy and very professional looking, but if you can get an editable version of it that everybody has access to, that might help start making some inroads to some of these things, you know.
Well, we thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. We wish the association all the best in its future work. And thank you so much for taking your time out, joining us on the show. Thank you very much. Remember, if you wish to report a bogus or suspicious real estate agent, please do so by contacting RealB on 9980773. And that's all we have for you on the show tonight. Thanks for joining us. See you next week. Good evening.